Mhm.
Hey everybody, just getting started here. We are very close to sharing Rise of the Sacred Sovereign on all of our platforms. Thank you for being patient and for being here. Just passing the 11:08 hour. It's all happening on the solstice.
Summer solstice.
We're almost there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hi there, happy solstice.
Happy solstice, everybody.
So here we are for Rise of the Sacred Sovereign. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jayashree Devi Dasi, and this is my beloved
Kalani Das, Clarence Dow-Spielman.
You're the best. We just had our 9-year wedding anniversary, and today we are celebrating the solstice with you. We are so, in a very real place, and we're excited to share because today we are actually interviewing each other.
Always.
And this guy keeps changing. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I am the co-creator of the Soul Culture Yoga School. I'm a spiritual educator and a mentor. We created the Soul Mapping Matrix Online Digital Academy to go along with our Soul Culture Yoga Certification School. And I have had the honor of mirroring amazing souls doing their shadow work, their light work, their healing, generational patterns, trauma, drama, and the whole thing very much privately and publicly for the past 15 years. Kala, what do you do?
I'm an educator.
Yeah, you
I
are.
am a delightful co-parent and co-creator of the Soul Culture Yoga School and of the Soul Mapping Matrix. And I like to work with all sorts of people on discovering what lights them up and turns them on.
Jai, you're an amazing homeschooling daddy and active educator of our beautiful daughter, and I am forever always grateful for that. So we have been diving into the Soul Mapping Matrix, and what that means is that we come live on Rise of the Sacred Sovereign, and we talk about what it is to be grihastas in the world, what it is to be married, co-parents, co-educators, as well as leading and growing in spiritual community in the real world.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are we doing today?
Well, I am super excited to ask you some questions, and I know that you have some questions for me, and maybe we'll allow that to take its own life and flow. So I would really love to hear you share just a little bit about you growing up with your faith and your connection, because you've always had such a strong, beautiful, embodied relationship with the divine. And it's evolved over the years. So growing up in the Jewish community, what was that like for you? And how did that shift to your love of yoga?
There's obviously a very real awakening of humanity right now, and we're all remembering that we love being in sacred and sovereign relationships. And while there is like that internal timeline that we all have, our souls, our own karma, I have it, there's obviously an external higher force timeline that happens too. And now in this, like, my 46th year of living, I can really see it outside of myself. You know, they say when you have a baby, that's your heart out on your sleeve in the world. But I loved Judaism. I loved it. I was very religiously inclined always. It's true. I always was active in the Jewish youth community. We just met at an event the other night, a dear friend from childhood who I did a Nefti event with. And of course, I've been a yoga teacher now for a long time, and I go by Jayashree, but my OG name, Deborah, which is an amazing name, biblical name, she said, "You look just like Dow-Spielman." So amazing. And I was like, "I am." It was hilarious. And she was like, she talked about singing and acting and making retreats basically in Jewish youth group, which I did, which so now makes sense that understanding community in Judaism and understanding that there was always a very inclusive, loving desire to serve in community. And that happened with Judaism because everybody understood they were, not just maybe part of a tribe, because there are various levels of, religiosity. There were various angles, more mystical, less mystical, but everyone loved God. And so that in itself, even just naming the divine, the naming of it, I think was the glue that brought people together. I have certainly had an amazing time growing up and being active in that community. Knowing Hebrew is absolutely one of the most majestical languages there is. I didn't have too much of that. There's always politics, there's always nationality. Hi, Felicia. There's always all those aspects of a religious organization, but I never felt the organization. I felt the love of singing. I felt the love of dancing. I felt the love of glorifying the divine. But they didn't meet. They didn't meet. And as I took those steps into my life and into the world, I needed more. I wanted more answers. I wanted to find community always and forever, and I can find that within humanity, but I knew there was more. I knew there was more from Vedanta. So that is part of how I loved growing up Jewish. We shared Oi Baby with Narayani.
We did.
Oi Baby is this really cute video show.
I'm really curious about... So I know that this was the beginning of your life, and your pivot to yoga you write so beautifully about in Discover Your Bliss, and how it was also part and parcel of you really coming into a healing practice, or what we call connecting with your medicine in a very deep embodied way. And yoga is wonderful for that. But growing up Jewish in that community, when I hear you share about how there was these through lines of connection, of being surrounded by people that shared a love of God in their own way, in a very particular way, how did that support healing? How did healing happen, and how did also the shadow work that we talk about in the soul mapping matrix, like being able to name certain things and have the healing come from that authentic recognition of like humanity and human condition?
My fortune was in my family. I have an amazing family. I have amazing parents, a wonderful brother, lots of cousins. And it's very interesting though. I had that support, and I also had pain, but there were always some, there's always going to be generational patterns that come in. Hi, Felicia. Yes, you grew up Jewish too, and there's a depth of spiritual and mystical wisdom that is universal and so resonates. So does. I've talked to so many yogis that come from Judaism. I've also spoken to a lot of, there is the other side of going more towards the atheist or agnostic, and then I have tons of cousins who found Jesus in Christianity.
That's right.
There's so many different ways we can all find our highest timeline for the now, for this life. Personally, I had an amazing family who supported me and was loving and humble and hardworking. But I have to honestly say that I needed to go find more answers, because there was always a bit of an awe and reverence aspect of, like the rabbi and the cantor are very personable and very lovely, and everyone coming together and singing songs. But there was still something kind of that wasn't connecting the spirituality, the divinity, and the religion. So spirituality could be in my singing, spirituality could be in my dancing. But when it came to really talking about shadow or generational patterns or healing work, it's very possible that because Judaism was so centered around the Holocaust and around a Holocaust and around pain and around God in the form as being righteous or angry, that it did not quite jive with my soul. And I became a yoga teacher eventually, before I even found bhakti. And bhakti is the devotional aspect of being in very close relationship and serving divinity. And with that, I understood, oh my gosh, there are all these different relationships we can all have running around, both in the spiritual world and mimicking that in this material world, and understanding different levels of consciousness. And because of that, I was able to go deeper into shadow work and healing work that really probably wasn't touched upon as much in my Jewish upbringing.
Interesting. So I what I hear you sharing is that there was a very strong community and wonderful relationships between the people, but that didn't necessarily, that wasn't your experience with God himself or herself.
Exactly.
And that level of intimacy, I heard you say that there was a mood of on reverence. There's a lot of storytelling around God's more wrathful moods, or more, paternal, stern moods, judgment moods. What other moods did you discover were possible to have an experience and relationship with God as you continued on your journey?
Well, that's a beautiful question. That is the human question, isn't it? So we always talk about in Soul Mapping Matrix that it's all about relationship, right? It's not just business or just health. It's the through lines between all of them. And because I learned that we are sparks or part and parcels of God, that we are made of Sat Chit Ananda, that our very molecules are made of the same material as the divine, that is not exactly talked about in more Judeo-Christian values and principles or philosophy. In the philosophy that is much greater and varied, that is the Vedanta philosophy, you can have all different parts and parcels of yourself in not only that mirrors God, and not just like I'm a human being and I'm made in God's image. That's not quite enough. I wanted to know every single layer and molecular, biological, and subtle energetic part of me that related to God. Because you know what? I've done this. I've done this many times. Like, it wasn't my first rodeo. And I kept feeling that through yoga. Like, yoga really brought me into understanding deeper levels and more parts. And so did acting.
Yeah,
it was
I was just
originally the acting and going through Shakespeare and going through every level of music that I could feel all those vibrations. So it was understanding my humanity and the layers of pain as well as the layers of bliss that made me think, well, if I'm made part and parcel and I'm just an image of God, then I must actually have more of a relationship to the various parts and parcels and personalities of God. And yoga talks about all of those divine parts and parcels and personalities, which is quite satisfying to the soul. At least to my soul.
So how, in your acting career has, just thinking and talking about it, because I grew up as a musician and being immersed in the classical training as a musician, which there is some personality to it, but it's also a lot of just the technicality of, executing the notes and being able to interpret the phrases, and you can feel it with music, but studying the classics and Shakespeare and all, it's almost like immersing yourself in the study of the human condition from that perspective, from that time, place, and circumstance. So how did that, would you say that prepared you to, as you say, recognize the moods of I guess here's my question.
By the way, anybody, we share this,
please.
We just want to let you know that Rise of the Sacred Sovereign is our way of having a conversation with our community.
Yeah.
We've all been through so much, and whether we have a yoga school happening or we're working privately with people or mentorship, we wanted to have some connection with people all over the world, and this is the way we can do it. If you would like to share, hi Jesse, if you want to share anything with us or ask a question or respond, we are so grateful, and we read it because we want to connect to you.
Yeah, this is why we go live instead of, we could pre-record videos and put them out, but it's nice to have the
conversation
so
that we can rise together.
Yes, and thank you for that, because now I have a little bit of clarity.
I love what you're sharing though about your experience in classical music, and I hear you really like starting to break apart, as we do in Soul Mapping Matrix, the difference between that linear timetable, step-by-step experience of the inward versus this expansive experience that we come into when all the music comes together. But go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, I mean, that very much is the musician's journey. There's a very deep inward practice. There's a lot of, solo. It's almost like a yogi going into the cave and meditating. It's like going into the practice room and practicing for hours every day. And that's a lot of what it takes to cultivate the embodiment, so that when we come together and we play with others, we can expand and manifest in an external way. But what I want to ask to you is, how has your study of acting in the classics as a Shakespearean actress, as a Broadway actress, and
Off Broadway. Off Broadway.
Even better. Even better. You got to do all the take all the risks and make all the big statements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's true. So how did that study of the humanities and the human condition, together with your upbringing in one religious community, incredibly cohesive and beautiful, and transition into another spiritual community that was resonating with your desire for relationship, how does that then, how have you created the soul mapping? And how does that connect with soul mapping and what you do? Because what you do with people is you really serve their own inherent relationship and the unfolding of and the unpacking of, as we're talking about, all the shadow aspects, all the emotions that haven't been named, some of the emotions that have been that are already there, that they're desiring. How did that all happen? How does that all fit together?
I met a young woman the other day who had been in a different acting company, the Atlanta company, and I was in Stella Adler at Tisch, which is at NYU, and we were kind of comparing and laughing so much at all the notes of life when you're in a conservatory. Studying Shakespeare is studying a microcosm or of the macrocosm. Studying Shakespeare is to study life. Studying acting in general, or any method acting, is to study psychology, humanity, religion, science, community, egalitarianism, politics. It's a study of all of it. And so it was incredibly enriching to work my whole life in the theater and then, move towards being a teacher of yoga. The issues of boundaries, of objectives, of intelligence and using intelligence wisely, negotiating, shadow work, all these things came up in acting. And so when I went and played a character like Bottom in Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, which is very much a man embodied, who ends up with a donkey's head and is going through whatever drama he's going through, that is an experience of shape-shifting that, if done well, takes on a tremendous amount of psychology and awareness. And then in some ways, that whole process of awareness, shifting the core desire or the objective and making choices, is from acting. And so I knew that there was a higher Vedic wisdom and philosophy and broader scope of not just humanity, but of spirituality in relationship to God, which I needed as a religious person, because I needed that. Because I always studied ethics or religions, and it's just my desire to find some self-awareness and containment. But then it's that shifting up into that higher vibration of what people now call manifestation. They call it bliss. We call it bliss, living a good life, having an authentic life. Because that is our fortune and our nature, because we're made of desire. So the actor first learns what's the desire, because we don't speak unless we have a desire. Why would you speak? If you're a yogi in the cave, you don't need to speak, right? But the speaking, the baby crying, is the first time it says something. So there was an absolute parallel to my work when I decided I wanted to master that world, even though I knew that even Shakespeare was probably reading Bhagavad Gita, right? Or, I knew that Ralph Waldo Emerson or Thoreau on Walden Pond was reading Jaiva Dharma. He got a copy of it, or Bhagavad Gita, or any parts of the Srimad Bhagavatam that have come through our acharyas and our sages. Everything is kind of coming from that. So it was a natural evolution to utilize those skills and put them into the soul mapping matrix because they work. They work, and they're absolutely, they work every time.
So and that's so beautiful, and it's sparking another question.
It's fun to talk about this.
So fun.
I'm so glad we're doing this. We've never really talked about this.
Well, on camera we do this all the time. This is our life.
Yeah, we do it all the time.
Yeah, but
others.
it's special to do it in
is.
Service, right?
In service, because how can we serve?
So I hear you.
I went to Lee Strasberg and then Atlantic Theater Company. You did? There is so much overlap. Thank you for giving words to it all in this way that lands and makes sense of things for me. You're so welcome.
Jai.
How amazing.
Wow.
How amazing. Yes, I feel like we're all coming out. I called this years and years ago when we did Soul Mapping Matrix that came out of Soul Mapping Mentorship. We said the council of amazing people is coming out, and the people who have all these amazing skills will be able to shift in the portal and utilize them for their greatest work. And that's why we have a school, because we want people to remember these aha moments, and I too want to remember them.
Jai. So what I hear you saying and expressing so beautifully, it's so clear that the process of acting means having something to say and being truthful about it. You know, like I hear we've
had
so many funny stories.
He'll be like, you've said.
Well, some of the best coaching that I've received from you about, business relationships or how to show up in a family conversation, or just really be authentic to take a situation to the next level, is about embodying my truth and speaking out the truth. And so much of your acting work reflects that. And so you have been a mirror for me, you're a mirror for so many in showing up as their best selves and really, as you're saying, pivoting from their desire and speaking from their desire. So it really resonates when they're making the choices in the moment of what they're actually saying, because the awareness and the core desire, that's almost like the prep work. Right, that's preparing for your character. So here's my question. I hear a lot of people in the coaching space taking some of these ideas around, if you want to be a $1 million coach, you need to first create the identity of the person that is that $1 million coach, and you need to make that your identity. And that's like the first step to actually being the $1 million coach. Instead of saying, I need to do this and learn this skill and then do this thing and do this thing, that's all part of it. That's all the external, but the internal work, I've heard and seen a lot of coaches talking now about the inner game and it's mindset, but it's a deeper level of identity. So how does soul mapping do that, and how does someone who is doing this, who also doesn't just want to make $1 million, but wants to live in alignment with their soul, and that wants to have a deep sense of trust and authenticity that what they're doing is completely in integrity with their soul, which is a way of saying the deepest part of themselves, so they're not getting led astray to do this thing or that thing for a reason which is not going to be an eternal reason. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
So how do you create and really get in touch with your eternal identity?
Eternal identity.
Yeah.
I made a post last night that I was very nervous to make, because I have been doing some very deep healing work since we moved a year and some ago to support an ashram. And you speak these words, we manifest these words. I'm going to support an ashram. I'm going to commit myself to 1 year to fully support. And what that means is that I am going to allow myself to become uncomfortable in that which I do not already know. Because an ashram is a sacred house of spiritual uplevel and worship.
Wait, say that again? That's a good one.
Which one?
An ashram is a sacred house of up-level and worship.
Yes, of both up-level and worship. So
That's
Soul
beautiful.
Mapping Matrix is a a reliable, relatable navigation tool for living in the house or the ashram that you are in currently and up leveling in that no matter what is coming at you. That is eternal. What the fashion of the day is, what the pandemic of the day is, the bug of the day, the virus of the day, what the medicine of the day, what the fashion of the day is, what the problem of the day is not your eternal landscape. It is not your eternal landscape internally. It is not the external landscape. Although karma, which is action reaction, kala, not kala, art, kala, time, these are inescapable parts of this material world. So we have to work with them. We also have to work with the eternal problems that show up generationally and subtly and all that. And that is not said. So when we soul map, we're working with the uprooting and awareness of that which is not said. And an ashram is a sacred place for things to be not said, sometimes said, for you to learn from. And one of the things I've been learning that I was, worried to share was a story that I realized that my mom never said the word jealousy. And I talked to her about this and she was fine. I told her I'm going to talk about this. She's very poised. She's very beautiful. She's very intelligent, very humble, very honest. But she also called herself vain when I was young a couple times. And I think she wanted to make sure I wouldn't be. But I was also very soft-hearted, very honest, didn't really have that kind of I don't really have that competition aspect in me outside of myself, only inside of myself, so I could be hard on myself. So no problem, but if you don't talk about something, it doesn't reveal itself to be worked on. So an ashram is a place where that which we are attempting to worship, which is ourselves in relationship to the divine, which is to say we are in worshiping the divine in all ways, it gets blocked. It gets blocked, and that block is a program usually. It's a narrative, it's a belief, it's a false belief, and it's always a false identity with ourselves and with each other. And so you were asking about, how we experience our blocks is one thing, but when we want to do the work to clear the blocks, we have to really go deep. We have to go really, really passionately under the surface, but that needs to be done in a very loving way. Otherwise, it can just be resurfacing triggers and not really going forward and doing the work to expand upon it and make it a portal, an obvious portal for our growth and for our bliss. And you were asking about specifically...
When you're working with someone, with one of your clients in this process of soul mapping, what does it, maybe just take us through the process of creating an identity that is going to enable them.
So that's what it was. I wanted to speak on...
Not just a temporary...
Okay, so there's I never studied marketing and all these things, right? It was never really in my mind. I just knew I needed to share. The reason I was able to even make a business that was successful and brand and put it out there was because of my god brothers and god sisters who supported me to do it, even though I didn't want to do it. So it's a very tricky thing, this authenticity. Authenticity simply means identifying with your true self. My true self is not this body. It's not my earrings. It's not anything external. It's not even my name, my job, or my family. My true self is that I am a jiva. I am a soul embodied. I have an atma and I have an ishtadev, which is to say I have the most beautiful, worshipable, divine form of the divine that I want to relate to. I want to be friends with my friends and I want to dance around and sing. This is what I want. But then there's how do you do that? How do you do the hard work? And because of my karma of pain, literal physical, physiological pain, I was always going to have to dig a little under the surface, dig a little under the surface. So you said that a lot of people in this business, the business of coaching, the business of mentorship, business that I've been in for 15 years now, and I watched many people come up and do this when I was doing it, and I was supported. that they have to become their avatar, they might say, or their client. And you don't necessarily have to become anyone, but it is really valuable to have gone through a certain level of wisdom and a certain level of karma to experience what other people are experiencing. Not everyone has to have that to start a business, to start a practice, because you have to just jump in. You have to keep going. You have to make it happen, right? You have to get in there. Oh, hi, Shanda. So as my friends know and my goddesses know, we have to jump in and be uncomfortable and do that. But you don't necessarily have to identify with everyone. You just have to have empathy, and you have to know how to work, which is to say, put yourself in the uncomfortable situations. Hi, love. Put yourself in those uncomfortable situations and then pivot in them to reveal what your core desire is and make better choices from there.
Sounds a lot like acting.
Does it?
Like being on stage and being in the moment.
We love this, Shanda. We're talking about acting and performing, and we're talking about how much that world has... I have brought that world into teaching and mentoring and coaching with yoga.
So here's another fun question. So what is the value, do you think, of certain approaches? And I'm going to mirror the acting world, which I know very little about, but enough to ask a question, and some of the teachings that we have in our Bhakti Yoga tradition. So in our Bhakti Yoga tradition, we have sort of two paths. We have the path of structure, and we have the path of spontaneity. And we know the goal is to be spontaneous, but we need some structure to get there. So in acting, and also, which is to say, our conversation is about acting on the stage of life and being ourselves in the stage of life. But in this process of acting and how it has come into your coaching style and how you help serve through that and so help serve yourself, what is the role of structure and what is the role of spontaneity? Structure in doing the work to, the shadow work, creating the identity or deconstructing what you would need to deconstruct, versus just in the moment how to respond naturally and trusting your intuition, like really flying, without the instruments, so to speak, with your eyes closed and heart open.
Eyes closed, heart open. So structure versus spontaneity.
Structure versus spontaneity.
It's such a vital conversation. We have that all the time.
Yeah.
I think that's probably why we've been instructed to work with couples, is because we're so... not opposite. I mean, our nodes are literally opposite Kalani. So we are literally always doing the work, which is why I think why we work with couples. So structure and spontaneity. So they are part and parcel of each other. Polarity, where you talk about polarity in massage school, you talk about polarity in yoga, and a lot of folks think polarity is the whole thing. We, as we move forward in Bhakti Yoga, don't just talk about the yin and yang, the sun, the moon, the dark and light. We don't just talk about the male and female. We talk about the divine dance between them and the energy within that creation, right? That creation, that baby, is what we produce, what we support, what we make. That's why you and I met doing yoga and music, because we were already creating. We do babies, we do business. That's what we do. So polarity between structure and feeling is, feeling in systems is vital. Like, if I did not, okay, so you have to feel. We've said this. If you can't feel, it's probably not real. If you can't, experience what's under the surface, you don't have much there. There's nothing to attract. Krishna is all attractive. The goddess is all attractive because the feelings and moods, when you go deeper, we call them many bhavs, of all various kinds of potency, shakti, of even in the spiritual world, what you would call jealousy, doesn't even exist. It's just like playfulness. It's everyone wanting everyone to do well and be happy, and also mostly to serve. But in this material world, all that gets flipped. And so we have to deal with those shadow energies and all that. If there was no structure to soul mapping matrix, it would be bunk.
Yeah.
It would just be a bunch of blah, blah, blah. It's not. It's got to have system. And so many, many years ago, after I studied acting, and I thought, man, I always thought I would be a teacher. Like in acting school, I was like, what else do you do once you act on stage? Because I'm a little psychic. So I saw my career, just calling it out. And then I was like, then what? You have to pass it on. Just like you don't have to be a mother or a father by having a physical baby. You can nurture, mother, father, others. But there is always a lineage. There's always a system. And Soul Mapping Matrix is, we worked very hard to make it a system from seeing it work in our yoga school and all my students for so many years, and in all the mentorship, which was always very private and behind the scenes. And I'm writing in my journal all these notes and all these couples, and I'm like, wow, this stuff works. And yes, so much of it in retreats, so much of it came from the acting world. But I'm interested in the creation. I'm interested in the baby, and I'm interested in nurturing that, because that never ends. And to do that, you have to respect lineage. You have to respect systems. You have to go to the source and figure out what works from there. And that's what's in the school. The spontaneity and the feeling, man, that's just natural for me. I know it's natural for you in some ways, but it's absolutely the juice, right? It's the joy, it's the juice. So we all have a different edge points of growth. If we work both, it's a really nice combination. I just want to say, I just want to read what Shanda wrote. She said, yes, that's what makes you great. Oh, I love you so much. I love you. Jessie shares, my sister has been saying something similar to me, rebringing our mom from assisted living into the home. Yes, she's been saying, become the type of person who could take care of mom. It resonated a bit. Absolutely. I mean, we always teach, and my teachers taught me, like my long-term therapists in the past, like I worked with a lot of different thought leaders and people, and they made it very clear, you don't actually have to be the identity of the person you want to be. You have to conceive of the identity and then do the work to embody that conception. And that's where a system comes in. That's why Vedanta works so well, because you can see all these householders. You can feel it. You can see in the world where shit is going crazy and falling apart. And if you look at it and get honest, you'll say, oh, I see that didn't work, or that's an overreach, or that's a perverted version of this awesome thing, or whatever, and then you can try to work within. You call things out. You call things out.
And you make choices. What I hear you saying is such a beautiful, to conceive of the identity, that's really the first realm of the matrix, to do that work. And I also love, by the way, when you're talking about spontaneity and feeling being really the currency of spontaneity and spontaneous action, spontaneous expression of that identity. It's the very beginning of the matrix, which is a system.
Yes, and then
the very first phase.
But the spontaneity and the inspiration and the abundance is the top phase, and this is what we don't get to say too much until people do the work. So how do you hold space and keep it authentic and beautiful and light and real, but know where the lie is? I mean, that's kind of like what I don't know about you guys, you can tell. My experience with therapy, with, traditional psychotherapy. And for me, I was very lucky to have a very powerful Gestalt method spiritual psychotherapist who was a Buddhist monk forever and a yogi and then an Osho disciple. So many amazing, I'm very lucky. But she was so powerful and amazing, and she called things out, and she understood Maya illusion. She understood how things worked. And even if we weren't exactly the same in our lineage, whether someone's got a different, like you're a Christian, or you're a Jew, or you're a Shaivite, or you're a Bhakta, none of this matters, because the principles of divinity are the same. Beauty, faith, charity, auspiciousness, joy, spontaneity, and vibrancy. It is our birthright to live our dharma. And so the top realm I'm always holding with my students. I'm always holding with mentorship. Maybe you can't give all that. I mean, we try to give it in a course. We try to give it in a workshop. We give it when we mirror people. But it's really in the mentorship, because that top level, that psychic, expansive level of holding someone in love and nurturing them while you're still doing the work underneath,
Yeah.
and holding the reality intensity that
Yeah.
pain and suffering in this material world is a real thing. That's very difficult.
What would you say that's why we call the first realm the realm of grounding and committing, because it's about committing in the moment and grounding into the work, right?
Yeah.
It's grounding into reality, grounding into feeling, grounding into core desire, which are the things that we're really aspiring and knowing in our heart that we are wanting to do, and working the path of healing, which is the second realm.
The medicine tools, understanding all the lineage holders, and where, like, I really love connecting with people about what they like. It's really not about me. It's actually about recalling and remembering and mirroring the subtle energetic imprint and experience. The same works for negative imprints and experiences. So the only way the way to heal a neural pathway that has trauma is to create a new one. And those actually already live inside of us as well. So yes, the medicine tools, and then team,
and then daily rituals.
Yeah.
And then
I said practual.
practuals.
I made a word.
Practuals.
Practual.
Yeah.
Rituals that are practiced daily. Yeah.
And then I'm just, for whatever reason, maybe I'm hungry, but I'm getting the vision of like a muffin. And so it's like the muffin top, which we all know is the best part of the muffin.
God,
That is the top realm. That is the realm of manifestation, right? That is the beautiful
the top realm of manifestation
of
is the
our
muffin top.
5D reality that comes from continuously, again and again, committing, grounding, pivoting, making sacred choices, being aware, pivoting again, making sacred choices. That's why we say going through the portal, turning our triggers into portals for growth, because we're always doing that, and supported by the healing practice that we have in the second realm. And that muffin top will just get so nice and golden brown. And
you know how when
delicious.
We lead classes and we play music and we sing, from my experience, that bliss, that connection that people feel from what they have said, and I don't know if anyone here has had that experience of taking a yoga class or being in a kirtan or having live music, as a musician, as a singer, and going to be in plays with people in music, that is an imprint that vibrates on such a deep level that you cannot even shake it. It's always in us. And so the top level of the soul mapping matrix, the reason we are leading retreats and bringing people to our home and to Bhakti Bandhav and to all the pop-up yoga classes that are now happening and traveling, that we're starting to do more again after this amazing year. It's a very powerful, real awakening to bliss. The actual experience of live music, divinity, this is not something that can be faked. This is the authentic part of you as a teacher, a healer, a psychic, a doctor, a therapist, a lawyer. We have so many amazing people in our life. Everybody is connected through our humanity by a thread of our divinity. But most people who are doing pretty well are talking about the thing that they don't want to talk about in some way, or they're expanding out of just talking about that, or just talking about the on reverence or the bad thing that happened, right? Like we were talking about Judaism, into the positive pivot. Hugs to you. So glad you could be with us, Shanda. Yes, we're closing up and we love you and so much. And thank you, Jesse, for the love. Thank you. That positive shift is the up level of our life. Jai. And we can consider closing with that as well.
Jai.
But you can be the mother, you can be the father, you can be the authentic coach, the business person. You can do all those things as well as do that deep work underneath. And that's what we wish to share with the Soul Mapping Matrix. We hear our daughter.
Mm-hmm.
She's
Time
coming
to
down.
pivot.
So
next
time I want to interview you
All right.
more. But thank you for asking these beautiful questions and sharing.
Yeah. It's my supreme pleasure and joy to serve and to be in the flow.
Well,
Thank you all for joining us and for being part of the conversation. It's an eternal conversation that we have every week.
Getting a call. How can they find
So many people want to join the conversation.
If you guys want to join the conversation, join us next week at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday for another Rise of the Sacred Sovereign.
Yes.
As well as go to jaishriyoga.com to find out what we are doing and be on the lookout for your pop-up yoga and music class near you. If you'd like us to come do that, give us a ring. jaishriyoga.com. Thank you, Kalanidhi Das.
Thank you, Jaishri
Vanchakalpatarubhyas cha kripas sindhubhyeva patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Love you.